family artifact down there, and she started trying to dig around, and I said something silly like, gee, you could use some help with this, and I've been a volunteer there ever since. But, so her proper title is Richard Saltonstall Jr., Curator of Maritime History. She's been doing this since 2010. Her background, she went to Colby. Well, she's from Vermont. Went to Colby, was involved in the Williams Mystic Maritime Studies program. Has a master's from George Washington University, and has had a number of maritime history jobs at Mystic, the Ocean Classroom, the Los Angeles Maritime Museum, wrong coast, and then down in Falmouth, and then came up here. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Perfect.
So far, yes.
So far. Okay, you just go loud. So tonight we're going to explore the herstories of Maine women and daughters who went to sea. And despite the old sailor superstition that women at sea were unlucky, the women accompanied their fathers and husbands on cargo voyages around the world. Some were literally born into the profession, and others joined their loved ones with initial trepidation. Using letters, manuscripts, and newspaper articles from the museum archives and objects from the collection, we'll learn about their experiences at sea. We'll meet the children who went to sea or were left behind to pursue educational opportunities on shore. Joanna Colcord, born at sea, received her early education on shipboard and chronicled her adventurous life at sea through photographs and reminiscences written later in life. Her compatriot Ruth Montgomery also took photographs of her childhood at sea, focusing on on the domestic life in the cabins and maintaining the social status quo from shore. The letters from Annie Black Dow, her daughters and sisters-in-law, explore the heartbreak of a mother who decides to leave behind a child on land for their education and proper upbringing. The wives who accompanied their husbands to sea will also tell their tales. Martha Mills Nichols, who grew up inland in Levant, Maine, documented the process of gaining her sea legs in her husband's shipboard newspaper, The Ocean Chronicle. Lucy Merrithew Nichols, daughter of one of Searsport's prominent shipbuilders, writes of yearning for more wind and how shipboard life makes her daughter grow rougher. Lilias Pendleton Nichols' experience of the Civil War on the high seas shows how wives and daughters defiantly dealt with adversity. Georgia Gilkey Blanchard's Our Wedding Trip Around Cape Horn documents the transition of a child raised at sea to a newlywed aboard her husband's ship. So, let's get going. So here we have Lucy Merrithew. In addition to her father running one of the 4 shipyards in town, Jeremiah was president of the Searsport Bank. Their home, the red brick home in the middle of our campus, overlooked the shipyard and the bank. She was the second wife of David Nichols Jr., whose mustard yellow house sits opposite her childhood home and is now owned by the museum. In the following letters, Lucy yearns for the adventure of sea life. These 1860 letters, we have little Henrietta, shown here, has not yet been born. Catherine is just 2, and Clara is 8. So May 6, 1860. I am quite in love with the Pacific. The climate is delightful. For the last 2 weeks, we have been sailing along so quietly, we could scarcely tell by the motion of the vessel that we were at sea. Almost everything in life has its bright side, and this is the bright side of going to sea. The dark side, I assure you, is terribly dark at times, and is rather the prevailing one. And then a couple months later, on December 4th, we are sailing along in the southern latitude with the least perceptible motion. We might suppose our craft lying at anchor. We are all of us getting a little anxious to have a tussle with the winds. We've had delightful weather all of the time since we left New York, have been passing through some of the most genial latitudes in the world. Man is so constituted that he tires even if blessings long continue. So it is with us. The gorgeous sunsets. Of the sunrises I have nothing to say, as I have never placed myself in a position to witness any as of yet. The broad, expansive water, at times almost undisturbed by a ripple. The graceful motion of our vessel as she moves onward, ever onward, never resting from her labors, with all of her sails set to catch the light breezes as they are wafted along over the ocean. The invariableness of the climate, all have ceased to charm us, and we are looking impatiently for strong winds which are to hasten us to our destined port. Since coming around the Cape, we have had high winds nearly all of the time, and very cold most of the time. I did not anticipate so much cold weather. We have all of us got through it very comfortably. The children particularly, they are both of them very hardy. Clara grows very rough and awkward. I find it much easier to manage her here than at home. She is perfectly contented and says 2 years will soon pass away. Claire didn't stay rough all her life, which we'll learn. So I want you to think, would you worry about the rough manners of your children picked up among the sailors? So here's little Clara, who, as I said, was the daughter of a sea captain and the granddaughter of one of the shipyard owners in town. Captain Nichols, her father, became a captain at 19. Clara went on to study opera in Europe under the stage name of Bianca Monti, and died of typhoid fever in Paris. And we have her letters to her families from her travels in Europe. Here's one of my favorite. I've named my cat after Lilius. She's a Spitfire, as cats are. So in addition to the danger of natural elements, cargo ships face danger in times of war. The Civil War devastated the American merchant marine fleet, as merchant vessels became the targets of Confederate raiders operating around the globe. Lilius was the daughter and wife of Searsport sea captains. Her father was Phineas Pendleton II, and if you know anything, there's a lot of Pendletons in Searsport, and a lot of them are related to Phineas the First. Her husband, William Green Nichols, and she went aboard the Delphine during the Civil War. The Delphine was named for her sister, and the ship was taken by the Shenandoah in the Indian Ocean on December 29th, 1864. Lilius fought the Confederates' fire with a tongue lashing of her own. And in a newspaper article commemorating her 90th birthday, she tells the tale. The Shenandoah lulled her victims into a false sense of security by flying the English flag. Seeing another ship on the broad ocean provided crews and captains with a chance for a social call. And as Captain Nichols saw the Shenandoah approach, he drew closer for a chat. Once in range, though, the Shenandoah fired a blank shot and began clearing away her 2 forward guns, which caused Captain Nichols to pull up short rather than try to outrun the raider. Lieutenant Waddell of the Shenandoah informed Nichols that the vessel would be sunk, to which Nichols replied, "My wife is aboard, and she's delicate and nervous," who would not survive the transfer to a Confederate ship. Waddell seriously considered allowing the Delphine to go, but had the ship's surgeon check on Lilius. Lieutenant Waddell wrote in his journal about her, "I was surprised to see the sick lady, a tall, finely proportioned woman of 26 years, in robust health, evidently possessing a will and a voice of her own." As they were being transferred to the Shenandoah with her young son Phineas, age 6, and the steward's wife, they had a bosun's chair. So this is just a plank of wood with ropes, and that's what you're hanging as you go across between the two boats. Lilius insisted on bringing her canary bird in its cage, and with perfect self-possession, ordered the sailors of the Shenandoah when to raise and lower the chair. Once above the Confederate vessel, she inquired of Lieutenant Waddell what he intended to do with them and where they would be landed. When he jokingly informed her they would be landed on the island of St. Paul, an inhospitable volcanic rock in the southern Indian Ocean, she replied, "Never! I would rather stay with you." Instead, the Shenandoah took the prisoners to Hobson's Bay in Australia, near Melbourne. The books Lilius had brought on board were returned to her except for Uncle Tom's cabin, which had been tossed overboard.
Oh boy.
And Captain Nichols' ship chronometer was kept. So the chronometer is the thing that keep time so you know where you are. Navigation is a lot of intense calculations, and knowing exactly the right time is very helpful in doing that. Lilius's reaction was, "If those chronometers and sextants were mine, I guess I'd make them give them to me." And her last words to the Shenandoah crew were, "I wish that steamer may be burned." The Delphine crew had signed parole papers preventing them from speaking about the Shenandoah's motives, but Lilius ignored the confidentiality agreement and told the U.S. consul and others about the deception of the Shenandoah in hiding her nationality and their mission to destroy all vessels flying the federal flag. So those are the facts. Australian filmmaker and author Paul Williams wrote a novel in 1992 about the love affair between Lilius and Lieutenant Waddell, based on family documents not available to the public. The family contends that Waddell's memoirs were cleaned up to remove all trace of the affair. Waddell's circumnavigation of the globe to reach England was blamed on a blackmail plot by a mate who threatened to expose the affair. So, if you found yourself in the middle of a war, would you meekly obey the orders of the enemy or voice your own opinion? So there's a lot of children of the Dows, and so we're gonna meet Annie, who's married to Captain Jonathan, and their children Sarah, Celia, who married George Carver, Hattie married Cyrus Noyes over here, and we'll hear about Ella Havener. Or no, sorry, Cora Eaton. Anyway, so these sons and daughters represent the various ways Searsport residents interacted with the sea. Some went to sea as a family, others left wives and children ashore, while fathers pursued their livelihoods at sea, and some stayed rooted to the land. We have the family letters and reminiscences to help tell these three stories. So first we have Annie. And Annie struggled with the decision as to whether life at sea benefited or inhibited her children, and she experimented with each subsequent child. Only 19 years old at the birth of her first daughter, Catherine May, or Kate, at the Illinois home of her parents, Annie made the decision a year later to leave Kate with grandmother Black, while Annie went back to sea with her husband. It took 6 years for Kate to return to her family. At the age of 7, Kate joined the family on a cruise to Trinidad and Buenos Aires. She was left in Searsport with Sally Eaton and her only daughter for school, while the family left for another cruise. At 10, Kate was joined by little sister Sarah, age 6, for schooling. At the age of 15, Kate once again joined the family on board ship to take care of her little brothers and sisters, while Sarah and Fred were left at home. At 16, Kate's whole family were together, and her brother Scott remarked, "The family has been separated so much and so often for the last 15 years. The 6-month stay in Searsport was the longest period of time the family spent together under one roof." Brother and sister hardly knew each other. It was to be short-lived, as Kate was sent off to a girls' school in Boston, while the other 4 children rejoined their parents on board ship. When the family returned 16 months later, Kate had married George L. McCurdy, who was the young man cashier in the Bridge & Lloyd ship brokerage office, where Kate made her monthly call for her allowance check.
For what? For what?
Allowance check.
Oh, yeah.
So they moved to Chicago, where George was manager of the branch of the insurance company of North America. When Kate suffered a stroke when traveling home from Europe, George learned how to communicate with her. So finally she found someone who's going to stick by her through thick and thin. So Sarah was Kate's little sister. So soon after Sarah was born, she went to sea with her parents. Apparently Annie did not wish to be separated from her subsequent children. When the brig Atlanta stranded on a reef off the dry Tortugas, Annie and baby Sarah were housed with the local lighthouse keeper during the unsuccessful salvage operations. Her brothers stayed with their uncle George Carver, while the sisters stayed with Sally and Cora Eaton. Sarah's childhood, and we have her letters, was one filled with eating oranges, apples, and figs in foreign cultures, playing barefoot in the southern climes, and fishing from the afterdeck. While in Yokohama, the family celebrated 4th of July and visited the military vessels at the invitation of the junior officers. Her childhood at sea ended abruptly when her father died from complications of appendicitis, and the remaining family moved to Illinois. Just before his death, while wintering in San Francisco, Sarah imagines a world where her brother Fred, who was left in Searsport for school, could magically show up for the afternoon. She writes about rowing around San Francisco Bay. It was a lovely day. Clyde, Scott, and I were out rowing this forenoon. If you all come over after supper, we will give you a row. Clyde, Scott, and I go out rowing most every morning. Captain Emmons has a little boat he says we may have any time we want it. The other morning, we thought we would try our own boat. The oars were so heavy that I blistered my hands. If you'd been here yesterday, I would have taken you out to Woodward's garden to see the man who has wheeled a wheelbarrow across the continent. If Emma, Amos, Georgie, and you will come, I will take you next Saturday afternoon. It was quite rough yesterday morning, but we thought we would get ashore all right. So we got in the little boat. Charlie and Scott rowed us 2 oars each. Scott says he can row with 2 oars better than 1. We had quite a ways to go, and it was quite rough. When we got a little over halfway, Scott's oar slipped. Father caught it, and Scott tried it all over again. He was not balanced right. I think he was top-heavy, for by and by over he went, heels over, way up in the air, and away went his other oar. Father could not catch it, so we had to go back and get it. We all got wet then the water came in over the side once or twice. And like any teenage girl, Sarah requests the latest Searsport gossip. Write to me all about the fair, who got prizes and who didn't. What did they carry and such? I hope you got the prize for your map, and that Amos got it for his bookkeeping. Does Cabby Blanchard wear long dresses? Don't forget to tell me. Who's Amos sweet on? Maddie Harriman weighs 106.5 pounds, and I weigh 85. I am most 2 years older than she is. I suppose are having nice sleighing, ain't you? Have you got good skating? How I'd like to have a nice sleigh ride. Won't you and Amos come too? We will go over on the island and have a jolly time and bring Georgie too. You must excuse this late invitation, but better late than never. With her third child, Annie was still struggling with her decision to leave her children behind, and she writes to him, "Was much pleased to hear you got such good ranks in your studies. Are you much behind the others that were in your class when you left home? How I wish you would come and stop a few weeks with us." So this is their Aunt Caroline Dow. She was from Winterport and was known as Callie, and she married the only Dow brother who stayed on the land in North Searsport as a farmer. And she writes to her nephew Fred, "Oh Fred, don't never have an idea of going to sea. It is a hard, dangerous, exposed life. I should rather be a landlubber than sailor. If time should continue and my boys lived, I expect they would want to go and leave me. I will not worry and borrow trouble, nor will I have occasion." Well, wouldn't you know, her son Frank was a master mariner on steamships and was even enlisted in the Navy during World War I. So this is a set of another aunts. Celia Dow writing to her sister Hattie in 1871 from Hong Kong. "I suppose you're having plenty cold weather and plenty of snow. We had some very hot weather on the passage. We have plenty of fruit, orange, bananas, pineapples. The oranges are the nicest I ever eat. They bring them on board, stems and leaves on them, just as they are picked from the tree. The weather is nice and cool here, very healthy, with the exception of the smallpox, which is raging badly. All of us have been vaccinated. Cyrus's arm is quite lame. He is very busy taking account of cargo. The ship is chartered. We are to go to Saigon and come back here. We shall be gone about 3 months, shall sail the last of this week. I haven't been ashore but once. There are lots of pretty things here, and some things are very cheap. You don't have to go on shore to see the things. The peddlers bring all kinds of things on board. Sometimes there'll be half a dozen peddlers on board at once. And they have everything you can mention. Silks are very cheap, cotton cloth is high, calico 25 cents a yard. I haven't bought anything. Cyrus has bought me a number of presents and curiosities. The men and women dress very ordinary. I suppose you've heard tell of the little feet women have. I have seen plenty of them. Their feet are so small they have to go on crutches. Their feet ain't any larger than little George's. Unfortunately, Celia died in May of that same year. So as a mother, would you leave your children on shore for their education and upbringing, or take them aboard ship? This is the sister-in-law of Lilius who gave the tongue lashing to the Confederates. So Martha Mills Nichols grew up inland in Levant, Maine, and wrote in her husband's shipboard newspaper, the Ocean Chronicle. A life on the ocean wave, the man who wrote it was green. He had never been to sea in his life, and a storm he had never seen. He should have stepped aboard our good bark Clara about the time she passed Sandy Hook and remained with us during our passage to Sydney. We were hardly out of the sight of land before the captain came down into the cabin saying, "It is blowing quite a gale now." It is not so very bad either, but after one has been on land some time, on getting out on the deep water, a moderate breeze seems quite uncomfortable, with everything in the cabin that is movable on the move. Your head, of course, is not exactly level until you get accustomed to the motion. After a while, the steward rings the bell for dinner. An attempt to eat is almost a failure. Your head and stomach feeling a little out of order. Nothing tastes natural. Dishes slatting around the table, now and then upsetting, spilling something that is supposed to be a choice article. The chairs moving and twisting around, if not lashed. This is only a view of the life on the ocean with a moderate gale. At least, I presume it did not amount to much, for I ventured to ask the captain if it was not blowing quite hard. "Oh no," he says, "this is nothing. I don't want less wind than this at all on the passage." I think that the most miserable state of affairs is when there's a gale coming on. If you have any regard for your safety at all, you cannot help watching the barometer as it begins to fall when it ought to be rising. You are aware of a change very soon. The wind commences to blow, not very hard at first, but increasing all the time. On lying down at night, you take another look at the barometer, falling all the time. The night is dark as possible, the vessel heaving and tossing in every direction. All the time you are thinking to yourself, where or when will this end? I tell you, there's not much rest for the weary on a night like this, with only a plank between yourself and eternity. You will be likely to make a confidant of yourself by saying, if I am fortunate enough to reach terra firma again, I will never attempt another sea voyage and such and such. This will do very well for a short time, but come to keep up such nonsense for 100 days, it is wholly unbearable. I have failed to see anything so very beautiful or awfully grand in a life on the ocean wave. So this is a copy of one of her husband's newspapers. And so she talks about exercise on board ship. Walking is an exercise too much neglected by our American ladies. Let them begin when girls to understand what their limbs were given them for, and they will find walking a source of enjoyment rather than an inconvenience. It is nothing uncommon for an English lady to walk 6 or 8 miles at a time, and they are generally very strong and robust. On the ocean is not the best place for a lady to make that advancement in the general knowledge of the world, as there is much of the time that they are wholly deprived of all society, although they can always find a chance for exercise. If the weather is fine, one can find some useful exercise that will serve to break the monotony of the long sea voyage. If the weather is rough, all that a lady need do is look out for herself, and that will furnish her with all the exercise needful. But she will have to wait until it becomes fine again for the amusing part.
Do they have a printing press on the ship?
They did. And it was about the size of her treadle sewing machine. So, very small. So if your husband or father took you aboard ship, would that be a fun adventure or a terrifying prospect? What would be your biggest fear? Helen Frances Cleves Small was a sea captain's wife from Millbridge. She married Captain Walter F. Small in September of 1900. 4 days later, she joined him on his schooner, the Alma, for a voyage to New York, North Carolina, and the Caribbean. Helen continued to sail aboard the Alma on voyages in the coasting and West Indies trades. She kept a journal of this trip, which reads as a travelogue. September 20th, 1900. We sailed gracefully up by Bar Harbor, Mount Desert Ferry, and other picturesque places to Sullivan Harbor to be loaded with paving. September 27th, anchored off City Island, New York. From that point, a good view was obtained of Execution Rock, the stepping stones ahead, and the many beautiful villas belonging to the summer residents. On October 7th, Bartholdi's Statue of Liberty held aloft her torch, which sheds its rays far out over the harbor, bidding all mariners welcome and assuring them safety, of which many accepted. On November 19th, we beheld the handsome highlands of Martinique and the St. Lucia Islands. The St. Lucia hills are steeply inclined and reach a height of over 3,000 feet. The scenery is beautiful, seeming like a picture. Many pretty coconut, banana, and palm trees surround the little huts along the water's edge. There are many orange groves, sugarcane fields, and coffee plantations on the sides of the hills all over the island. When in Castieri's St. Lucia, Helen observed, "A large iron steamship is here loaded with coal, and the Afro-Caribbean women are employed with the men discharging her. They are carrying baskets of it on their heads. The same women crews unload the lumber picked up in Wilmington, North Carolina from the Alma." On December 7th, we beheld the handsome island of Haiti. The landscape views of the states are pretty, but cannot compare with that of the West Indies. The mountains of Haiti along the southern shore are magnificent. They appear to be one vast chain of nearly a uniform height, unlike those of Martinique and St. Lucia in all respects. December 12th. We entered Baracoa Harbor, Cuba, which is small but quite pretty. The little town is situated on the banks, which are of hard, solid mud and real level. Back of town, the hills slope gradually to a level bank. It is on these hillsides that many coconut trees grown and supply the coconuts in abundance for the cargo of the Alma. From them they headed north to New York. Their next trip was to Eleuthera Islands in June of 1901, and she writes these observations as she neared the island. It was of keen interest to sit on deck, look over the rail, and watch bottom as the vessel passed over deep water to shoal water several times. From 22 to 30 feet deep, one could see the moss and sand on the bottom. The water is so clear. In some places were many conch shells, and natives dive for them to sell to people coming here. Our pilot informed us of glass-bottom boats sailing among the islands for the benefit of those who wish to sail and see bottom. As we pass the islands, the fragrance of flowers and blossoms are borne out to us, which is beautiful. The island is very long, low, and narrow with a sandy beach. The bay is real large and shallow with no harbors and holding ground for anchorage. Along the bay shores of the island, the settlements are small, having no streets laid out, nothing but sand footpaths. The Alma returned to Baltimore to discharge its cargo of pineapple. After the birth of their son Loring in 1901, Helen rejoined Walter aboard the barkentine John S. Emery for a voyage to Africa. Unfortunately, she died on the return trip to Trinidad in 1902 at the age of 25 of cancer. So here we have Ruth Montgomery, who was born into a seafaring family in East Booth Bay in 1880. She traveled with her father, Captain Albert Montgomery, and her stepmother, Mary A. Mame, on long voyages aboard the vessels her father commanded from the age of 5. Ruth's father took command of the bark Carrie Winslow when Ruth was 15 years old. It was around this time that Ruth began making photographs. her images captured the 3 voyages to South America in 1899, 1901, and 1903. She avidly documented her sea voyages and her visits to ports in the southern hemisphere, notably Buenos Aires and Rosario. The Winslow was delivering Maine lumber to these ports for the building trade. Ruth continued to make photographs on glass plates until 1916. Ruth captured the people of Buenos Aires. Here's the orange boy peddling his wares aboard the ship. Through her work, one gets to know her family at work and at leisure, at home and abroad. Here, Ma, Mary Thorpe Montgomery, and Pa, Ethelbert Montgomery, are in the cabin aboard the bark Carrie Winslow. Albert retired from sea upon completion of his last voyage to South America in 1903. Both he and Ruth took positions at the Boston Cold Storage Warehouse. Ruth lived with her parents until their deaths, and thereafter she lived alone, retiring from the Boston Cold Storage in the 1940s. She never married. Upon retirement, she returned to East Booth Bay, where she had often vacationed with family in the summer. In later years, she turned to her passion for gardening, enjoyed playing canasta with friends, and became active in the Methodist Church. She died in 1967 at the age of 87. Ruth captured the work aboard ship. Repairing sails is a vital skill on board a sailing ship. The spare bolts of canvas were a vital part of the ship's stores. Here, Captain Ethelbert Montgomery and a crew member known as Wheatley take needles in hand aboard the bark Carrie Winslow in 1898. 15 years later, the vessel was lost in a storm off Cape Hatteras on the way to Florida with a load of coal. Life aboard ship included having working dogs who doubled as pets. Here's Topsy sitting by her house aboard the bark Carrie Winslow.
What was Topsy's job?
Rats. I bet Topsy was going after rats, or at least the ship's cat. Here the crew is bending on a new mainsail aboard the bark Carrie Winslow on a voyage from Portland to Buenos Aires, which allowed Ruth to create this iconic photograph of a centuries-old scene. Here she silhouettes the mast. You can barely see the lower part of the mizzen mast behind the main, together with the staysail. Looking at the platform at the top of the two mainmasts, at the top of the mainmast and the yards, you can see that the photograph was from the Winslow's left or port rail as the yards swung to the wind coming over the starboard or right quarter. Bright day has faded out the details aft, and distracting rigging has faded into the light. And Ruth's contemporary was Joanna Colkard, who was born on the bark Charlotte Littlefield in the South Pacific. She got a Bachelor's of Science degree from the University of Maine at Orono in 1906, and a Master's degree in chemistry in 1909 in photography. She studied at the New York School of Philanthropy and started a career in social work. She was the director of the charity organization department for the Russell Sage Foundation. But we love her because she compiled and published Roll and Go, Songs of the American Sailormen. Now we could spend a whole session just on Joanna. Joanna and her brother mourned the end of a life at sea. Both children counted their days at sea as some of their happiest in their lives. When advised by their mother and father to pursue other careers, each in their own way sought to archive and chronicle their life, as well as those of their fellow sailors at sea. We have a whole rack of boxes related to Lincoln and Joanna Colcord and we're just slowly going through them now. So more stories will come in the coming years. But there's correspondence, manuscripts, talks, and research compiled by Joanna and her brother Lincoln.
How old is she in that picture?
We think she's probably 8, so probably your age. Joanna recounts what it means to be a daughter of the sea in some of her reminiscences. Many of my seaborne friends from the village of Searsport were christened with names indicating the region of their birth, such as Mindoro, Fastnet, Iona, and I have been always glad my parents did not see fit to call me Caledonia. Taken out of school for years at a time, Joanna recounts, lessons went on daily, even at sea. Our parents consulted with the teachers in the homeschool before taking us away, and we covered the same subjects from the same books as did our schoolmates. We were living geography, although we only knew the edges of continents. One of our favorite games in stormy weather was to spread a nautical chart on the cabin floor, and with dominoes for ships, charter, load, and sail them from port to port with the occasional shipwreck or brush with Chinese pirates to liven things up. Mathematics, too, was a living subject. Our vessel found a way about the world by its aid. As we grew older, we participated in operations of finding the sun's position daily, casting the ship's reckoning, and laying off the chart the previous day's run, which all means they did a lot of math and wrote it on the chart. When another ship was sighted and came near enough for communication by flag signals, that was our day of glory. It was ours to search out the code symbols, select the many-colored flags for the hoist, and even translate the stranger's replies. We learned sterner things, instant obedience and self-control, orderliness, a necessary quality in the close confines of a ship, contempt for sham and double-dealing, because you cannot fool the sea. We learned that a job must be well done for its own sake, with it that little extra touch for good measure that is implied by the word shipshape. We learned something of duty, the stern taskmaster of all our days. So what are a child's impressions of such a trip? Recollections came in flashes. The feather market in Port Elizabeth with tons of ostrich feathers in bins. A southerly buster in that open roadstead, with stoppers on the anchor chains and the ship showing half their keels in their heavy plunges. Calla lilies growing wild in the roadside ditches of Port Natal. The Boogie Hole, a rocky pool at Newcastle where American consuls' children took us swimming. Ill-tempered llamas in Moyendo. And a trip by rail up to the Arequipa, crescent-shaped sand dunes and breathtaking curves and precipices. The cathedral plaza in that old Spanish city with El Misti, majestic and snow-crowned as the background. Eating ripe figs off the trees and seeing our garden friends nasturtiums clambering wild over the rocks. Sweet scents of desert flowers brought off on the evening land breeze as we rounded Cape Colmo at the end of Lower California. The tangy smell of fresh pine logs in the lumber yards at Tacoma. Children whose home was on ship became acquainted with the way men live and work together in many lands. Our lives were part of the world's great internationalizing movement to commerce. When ships were in port several times a week, one ship would be the rendezvous where captains and their families gathered for a social evening. Many a night, under the awning of some ship's deck, with the shorelights sending down long tap roots of flame into the harbor water, and the cigar tips glowing and fading, the child that I was listened to marvelous stories from the world's best raconteurs, seamen, agonized in vain effort to stay awake, to hear the ends of the last and most enthralling tale. Letter writing was an important part of life at sea. Joanna writes, an educative feature of seafaring life was the stimulation it gave to letter writing. Separation between members of families for long periods created desperate eagerness to hold the absent members close by, sharing through letters every minor happening. We children imitated our elders and kept long and detailed journal letters, both at sea and at home, learning in this way to break through the reticence of the average New Englander and describe with some degree of vividness what we saw and experienced. I feel certain that this early training in self-expression had a profound influence in turning both my brother and myself in the direction of writing. So here's some photographs that Joanna took. So we have a Chinese junk.
Did she develop these photographs on board ship?
I doubt it. I think when they got home.
Yeah.
Unloading ships in the West Indies,
Ooh.
and then a good storm at sea. So lastly, we're going to meet Georgia Maria Gilkey Blanchard, or Rhea. Georgia was the daughter of William Richardson and Georgia P. Sawyer Gilkey. And in between them are daughters Anne in the middle and Georgia Maria on the far right. Georgia was born in 1886. She married Phineas Banning Blanchard on October 3rd, 1906, and spent her honeymoon on the Bangalore. The couple and their 3 daughters retired from sea in 1915 and moved to Brooklyn, New York, where Banning took a job with the Turner and Blanchard stevedores. So we have her honeymoon journal, and she writes, "It seemed like old times being on board a vessel again. I spent most of my youth at sea with my parents, brothers, and sister. Banning grew up at sea too, and he was a captain before he was 20. Banning decided to teach me navigation and about the stars. He bought me a sextant so that I could take the sights with him, and a chart to plot our position each day. We started right off working the sights each day and marking my chart." So a good way to prevent a mutiny is only the captain and his wife know exactly where the ship is. So if only they know where the sextant's probably locked up, the charts are locked up, brought out, and that's how a good way to prevent people from writing. And there's other stories of the captain dies, the first mate dies, and the wife is the one who sails them back to port. So she's learning an important skill. So she writes, "I spent most of my time sewing, reading, and studying the sights. Evenings we walked the decks, read and listened to the phonograph. On Sundays, when the weather was good, the men washed their clothes with salt water and salt soap, and also did their mending. Sundays we read the Bible and looked at pictures in my postal collection. Every few days I made candy on a small oil stove. If it was rough, I had to hold the stove between my legs so that I would stay still." That's my scariest. I made several pieces of hardinger, which is a type of embroidery, shirtwaist and collars and cuffs for friends at home. July 4th was not much like it had been the year before, when we had a big party the night before the 4th in Searsport. Now, a year later, Eunice, who's her friend, and I are both married. I was a little homesick for my family and the old crowd. I also wondered about the summer people who had arrived or were coming soon. In San Francisco, I received 18 letters and 2 postcards. They were all well at home. A package was waiting for me from Mother. In it were 2 lovely waists, which fit perfectly and were just what I needed. I had luncheon with Isabel Curtis. Captain Nichols visited us and stayed overnight. In Kaleo, in Hawaii. I received 2 letters from my mother. It was good to get them. The next day I received a dozen letters. I was happy to hear from my family and so many of my friends. The first day in port, I was kept busy answering letters. The first Sunday in port, Lib Curtis visited us. He gave us some magazines and books. And then she gives us some insight into the living quarters and cuisine aboard the ship. The ship was very comfortable. There was a large after house with an after cabin, sitting room, and a forward cabin with a dining room. Each room had a good-sized skylight with a hanging lamp and a gimbal. So a gimbal was to keep the lamp steady and always right side up. There was a companionway out of the dining room up to the main deck, and a companionway from the after cabin to the coach house by the wheel. The after cabin had a rug on the floor, a built-in couch on each side, with red cushions on one side for port and green on the other for starboard. 4 easy chairs screwed to the floor, and a small table also screwed to the floor. A door from that room led to the captain's room, with a built-in double berth, built-in couch under the porthole, a chair, and a chronometer by the porthole. Off the captain's room was a bathroom with a tub and a toilet. Breakfast was at 7:30 a.m. with cereal, cornbread, or muffins, tea, and coffee. On Sundays, there was boiled salt, mackerel, and hot biscuits. Dinner was at 11:30 a.m. We had bean or pea soup, boiled salt beef, or as the sailors called it, salt hoss, potatoes, a vegetable, and a pie or pudding. On weekdays, the pudding was plum duff. On Sundays, with raisins added, it was called plum duff. There was a hard sauce made of butter and sugar creamed together. The butter came in 10-pound cans called tapa cans and was very good. Supper was cold sliced beef or hash, fried potatoes, gingerbread, or cooked prunes with tea and coffee. When we could, at 4 p.m. each day, Banny and I had hot chocolate and bread and butter. I made the chocolate on a small oil stove. So what skills would you bring to run a ship like Georgia did? Navigation, culinary, sewing? What living conditions would suit you? So that's just some of the many women we have stories of in the museum. So any questions? Yes?
Simply, I think you mentioned a little bit, but the cabins on some of these ships were quite opulent, weren't they, as far as?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you, everybody speak slowly, because I don't hear well. And
So the cabins were very opulent.
very
So
what?
here's a ship's cabin. It would look like that could be in someone's house. Yes,
How do they have so much food on the boat?
you stored a lot. So you would have a lot of tin cans of food. And then whenever you got to port, you would supplement it with, they were talking about oranges and bananas, or you'd get dairy. So on shore, I think you would eat very well, and the rest of the time when you're at sea, you couldn't have the freshest food, or you ate that first.
Did they fish?
You could fish off the back. Yeah.
Did they keep livestock on the boat?
Yeah, there were chickens and goats.
For milk.
mostly, yeah.
What about kitchens?
So there was a cook and a steward, and they had a whole kitchen or galley. So the women didn't really cook. It was those crew members' job. And some stewards and cooks really resented it when the wives butted in.
Yeah.
It seems like she had her own little stove,
Yes.
the one that made
Yeah, for
candy.
snacks. But not for full-on dinners.
And that was just for the captain and his wife.
Captain's
Nobody
wife.
else went that way.
No. Yes.
Do you have letters from people who did end up captaining, you know, having to run the ship, sail the ship home, or anything?
So we have a logbook for Abby Clifford, and the captain's writing in the log, and all of a sudden the handwriting changes, and it says, and maybe the mate took over. So it says, "Captain died, wife took over." So
Interesting.
that's the clearest example we found so far.
How many people were on these ships total?
Oh. On these square riggers, at least 20, 30. And then on the schooners, much easier to handle, maybe have a crew of 11.
And meanwhile, this ship of 20 or 25 people manning it, how big was the ship?
200 feet, maybe some a little larger, and then some down. The schooners were probably more 100 to 200 feet.
Entertainment. I mean, you mentioned they read books and they listened to music, I think you said, and
Right.
did they make any music?
So the wives, maybe, but more of the crew would have their off time, and they'd have accordions and bones and fiddles and sing. And there were work songs to keep everyone in rhythm
Yes.
as they're working. So that's the work songs. But then in your off time, you'd have ballads in the forecastle.
Dancing? Any dancing?
Yeah. I think more important, because you're working hard.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you have much energy. Yep.
What was the length of the ship?
So I was just saying, 200 to 300 feet. So when she's talking about walking, you could, women weren't really supposed to go ahead, you know, ahead of the mast. They were kept in the back, but you could do rounds on the aft deck,
Raps,
laps. You're going stir crazy.
Where people designated to take care of health issues, like if someone got,
So the captain was also the doctor on board, and so he had a medicine chest and a book. So, no, I mean, if you've read Master and Commander, that's a Navy ship, and so they would ship aboard a surgeon, but not these merchant vessels. So yeah, whatever the captain could do for you, otherwise you're pretty miserable. And these women were maybe brought a midwife on board, otherwise it was the husband helping birth the babies, so.
When people died on board, what did they do with the bodies? Did they throw them overboard?
They threw them overboard. There's stories of one captain's wife died when they were in Singapore, and they buried her, but then they exhumed her and brought her back in a lead casket. So if you decide it was really important for the body to come back, you could put them, brine them, you know, in the liquor barrel or a lead casket. But otherwise, I think for most of the crew, they would just go overboard. but the captain or the nephew of a captain the body might be brought back. You have to preserve it. Yes?
They must have had a very elaborate system of mail, letters that would be waiting for them in port.
Right.
If they're sent back. Do ships sometimes carry other ships' mail? And
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So mail would, if you were leaving New York and you were going to Hong Kong, the ship owner, the consortium would put letters on your ship to go to Hong Kong where they'd sit, and as ships came into port, they would gather their mail. And then the ship coming back, that you're going directly back. And then you get mail steamers, and eventually you have the telegraph. And so correspondence can happen more quickly.
So is there more men or women there?
More men were on ship. It was only if you were the captain's wife or daughter that you'd be on board ship. Yep.
Oh, only the captain could bring
Oh, yeah.
his family.
Well, so this one story, the steward's wife was on board. So I think if you're an officer,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe you could bring a wife. Or the steward would have, the wife is the assistant. But it was rare.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stories of who knows how many of them are true, of women who took on men's jobs and dressed as men and passed as men. Now that would be difficult on ship because it's very intimate. But are there any tales of women who?
There is. My intern is going through the logbooks, and it's a story about. I heard this story that a woman was found on this other ship. So it wasn't directly on the ship the logbook was for, but these stories are going around. And if you're really careful, you won't get found out. But eventually you are.
Yeah.
Yep.
You made reference to just now uncovering this and that. Do you have an overriding plan, or how are you searching all that must be available to your perusal? Do you have a plan for it, or is it sort of have a life of its own, or how do you?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So we have people like Alan and Bob who say, I want to see the Foss papers. And so they are pouring through page by page. That I wouldn't have time to do that. Oh look, there's this really interesting thing. That's more common. And we've hired a contract archivist to inventory, and she can get, or they can get a little more in depth, but still there's a set time frame they have to get through. So I'd say it's more researchers who stumble upon these things, or when we're researching an exhibit or for a paper. But it's so vast that we're not going through every page. And it's something to think about, but there's not a plan. Except for to get things inventoried as they're scanning through. And I have an intern this summer I'm having her go through the logbooks to figure out ports of call.
Yeah.
And of course she can't help it, but she's reading the logbook. But, these are unpaid, no, we do pay her, but it's a college student who can focus just on that. So it's hit and miss.
Are these handwritten logbooks?
Yes.
They must be very difficult to read.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
And here's my pitch. Have you learned cursive in school?
Yeah.
Oh, good. A lot of people haven't. So I think we're going to lose a whole generation of archivists who cannot read the handwriting.
Do you have to go through papers from that time to try to maybe find somebody that writes a little bit clearer to be able to decipher another letter?
It's training your eye.
Yeah.
And if you can pick out the words and then you can go back and your eye's like, oh yeah, I can decipher this now.
Or if you deal with it, one set of handwriting for long enough,
Right,
it starts to make sense and then you can read it, but it takes a while, I can tell you.
right. So you can say, oh, this is how they do their uppercase A's and lowercase, you know, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it's a good Sherlock Holmes sleuthing operation.
Aside from the handwriting, is the clarity of the print, like the ink on the paper, is that clear? Is it?
Luckily, yes, for the most part.
That's amazing.
That it's been in someone's attic, but it's been closed, and that we have copybooks, so it's, I'm assuming that you write your letter and somehow there's a carbon copy
Really?
on this really thin paper, and those I think we're gonna lose, cause it's a faint outline. Those are really hard to read, but for the most part,
All the log books had carbon paper in them?
no,
Oh.
these are a certain collection with these letters in a
Oh.
copybook.
Oh, okay, wow.
And it's, you know, that onion skin that's in here.
Mhm.
Yes.
What kinds of things did they bring on board ship?
So, from Maine, are you from Maine or are you visiting?
Well, I'm from this.
We're from New Jersey, but we
New
live
Jersey.
here now.
Okay, so looking up here, what do we have out here that, we have the ocean, right? So fish, and if you live on a freshwater river, then ice in the winter. Granite,
No, okay.
lumber, lime, which is a limestone, which you can fire and that turns into a fertilizer. So those are the big things from Maine.
They didn't bring any clothes or.
Maine was really good at extracting these raw resources and sending them to Massachusetts or somewhere else to be made into clothing. But then the Maine captains were such good sailors that they said, oh, you don't need to carry Maine products anymore. We'll send you to China and India and South America. And then they're carrying whatever the product for that place is. So they're carrying tea and silks from China or grain from South America or California. So they're carrying anything that needed to be shipped went on these ships. And so they were like the tankers, the container ships we have today.
I think she might be, I think she was asking, like, what did the people put in, like, their duffel bag or their suitcase?
Yeah.
Oh,
The people
sorry.
on the ship.
So your bunk is maybe the size of that row you're sitting in. So you don't have much room. So you bring your clothes, maybe your instrument, maybe pictures of your mother, your wife, or your sisters.
If you
So
can read, you might
things that
bring.
can fit in a duffel bag.
Did children bring toys?
So they talk about dominoes, so they have little games.
Oh, yeah.
And you might have a doll
Uh-huh.
or a top or something. but
Small toys.
small toys.
Yeah, I wonder what you would bring. What would you put in your bag?
Actually, maybe my son could.
Sewing kit?
Yeah.
Oh, what a good
Right.
idea.
Great.
Yep, you're definitely sewing.
Yeah.
Cards,
Yep.
are they playing cards?
Yep. And then all the souvenirs you're bringing back for your mom or your girlfriend.
Now, books, you didn't mention books, did?
Right.
Oh, yeah, that one.
If you can read.
Remember?
So the Seamen's Friends Society gave you, these little free libraries we see popping up.
Yeah.
So we have, it's a cabinet this tall filled with books.
Wow.
So maybe you can fit 15 or 20 in there, and if they have the religious or moral
Mhm.
books,
So that would go on the ship,
that would go on the
so
ship.
they had a little mini library?
Yep.
Yeah,
And you buy something from runs.
Right.
yeah.
I think the history of Maine is very interesting. I don't have a great depth in it, but once it stopped being ship-related and all of that, Maine's economy really took a decline.
Right.
Then after the Civil War, when so many people went out to better farming territory, Maine got left behind, and we were leaders prior to that because of the shipping and all the products that were needed. Do you ever tie in with historians to kind of like make a parallel study of what was going on at the sea and in the land?
Definitely. So John Baddock, who is a professor up at UMaine, did a whole sociological study of who went to sea, and then census records. He looked a lot at the census records to see what were people doing back here. So that's definitely, someday I'm gonna write that book, I think,
Yeah.
because I'm just fascinated.
Get that intern going on that.
Right.
So a lot of these people, even though they were from Searsport, those ships were home ported in like New York or
Right.
Boston. They weren't sailing from Maine.
No, so eventually, so once you're no longer transporting Maine goods, then you build a ship in Maine, you crew it, you captain it with a Maine captain and some crew, and then they're run out of the consortium in Boston or New York, and they never come back to Maine again, the ships.
Right.
And the crew on board comes back to Maine on the steamship or the train, but the ships don't come back. So, yeah, it's really interesting.
What, the shipping routes they would take, I don't understand anything about it. Is that free for anybody who has a ship to take them, or did they have to have connections in those other the places where they were going to buy goods, or?
Right, so you knew you were chartering, you knew you were picking up a cargo of cotton in Charleston, South Carolina, and it was gonna go to Liverpool to the textile factories over there. And then from there you pick up a cargo and you know it's gonna go to this next. So you could maybe think 2 or 3 steps ahead, maybe only 1, to know where you're gonna go next. And sometimes they just couldn't get a cargo and they call that deadheading. And so it's just empty. And they load up with rocks or something, ballast. So at least the ship's weighted down, but you're not making a profit.
No.
Yeah. So just like today, you know, with the cargo ship, with the container ships, you gotta know what you're picking up where.
Oh, I got you.
And today we have email and the phone. But back then it was letters or the telegraph with your owners back home saying, get the best cargo you can and the best price and.
Yeah.
How long did that all take for just to maybe set up one journey to go, even just to North Carolina from Maine? How long do you think roughly?
US it might be a little quicker, but it could be months. You're sitting in port waiting, or the owners are negotiating.
Wow.
So you're out for years at a time.
You had the shipping agents.
And they're shipping agents, yeah.
That was a huge business.
Yes.
If anybody's ever read Dana, that book,
Richard Henry Dana, 2
yeah,
years before
who,
the
what's his book called?
2 years before the
Yeah,
Knights.
right. Fabulous book about, and he writes their trip, at least one of his trips he's on, goes to the west and to pick up buffalo skins, leather, and he describes how they had to push down and squeeze and pull with ropes to get them tighter and tighter so they could put in more.
Right.
They just had, if you squeeze in, 5 more, you've got to do it. And
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about these cotton screws that I'm not sure I totally understand, but it's to get the
Yeah.
cotton to
hack it in.
compress. Yeah.
Stuff says.
Do you know what, I'm not sure about this, whether it's true or not, but were a lot of Maine's wooden ships sunk at some point on purpose? Was there destruction?
During the Civil War,
Is that
to blockade the entrance, the Stone Fleet. One Atlanta or Charleston or one of those.
That was an amazing detail that when they take the woman captive
Yes.
and they go all the way to Australia to drop her off.
Well, they were in the the Indian Ocean.
Which that amazes
Oh,
me.
well,
Why was there
yeah,
a?
so they weren't, what were they doing in the Indian Ocean? They weren't involved in the war? They just happened to be
The
captured?
Confederates are ranging the globe, attacking Union
Ships.
because if you can disrupt commerce, just like we're sanctioning all these things, if you can
Right.
disrupt the money for the Union, then maybe you can end the war. So yeah, they're all over the globe attacking ships.
I didn't realize that.
It just wasn't off the coast of the US that they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well,
Well-
I have a card if you come up with more questions. Fran has last minute ones.
Yeah,
You can think
yeah,
of.
thank you.
And I know where her office is.
Yeah, right.